who are here with us at the old courthouse and also those who are joining us online. Some of you may be here to provide public comment. The Board of Douglas County Commissioners welcomes public comment and in advance thanks you for following these procedures. Each action item on the agenda will offer an opportunity for relevant public comment about that topic. We ask that you wait until the agenda item you're here for comes up for discussion. Comments related to agenda items are welcomed after the board has had its opportunity to discuss the topic. The Board of County Commissioners will invite comments on topics not included on the agenda during general public comment directly after considering the consent agenda. This is a time for addressing issues not on today's agenda, but related to the general business of the Douglas County Commission. We'll first call on folks who are here in person, and then we'll turn to any online commenters who are here with us tonight. If you're here on Zoom, please plan to use the raise your hand function when the time comes, and listen for staff to call your name. All comments will be limited to 3 minutes, and we ask everyone to give their full name and Douglas County residence for our meeting minutes. All public comments should be directed to the County Commission. Campaigning for public office is not allowed. We also reserve the right to mute and remove any speaker who is vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. The public should also know that comments received by the Commission during our meetings do not represent the views of Douglas County government. If visual aids are used during the meeting, the presenter will share their screen. Please know that online participants will not be able to view them without a computer, smartphone, or tablet during tonight's meeting. Materials are published online for your reference as well. Lastly, recording of this meeting will be available on our YouTube page and website. Looking at our agenda this evening, it's relatively short. We just completed a work session with Lawrence Douglas County Fire and Medical. We have 2 items on our consent agenda, which will then be followed by general public comment. We have 1 item on our regular agenda, which is the 2024 Natural and Cultural Heritage Grant Program materials. Then we'll follow with appointments, Commissioner and Administrator miscellaneous before we adjourn. Commissioners, would either of you like to remove an item from our consent agenda for further discussion? Anyone here in the public like to remove an item from the consent agenda for further discussion? Anyone online? All right. I take a motion for the consent agenda, Commissioners.
Commissioner Reed, I move to approve items 1.1 and 1.2.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes 3-0. We'll move on to general public comment. Is there anyone here who'd like to provide general public comment to the commission this evening? Anyone online, Sarah? All right, we'll close general public comment and move to our regular agenda item, which is the 2024 Natural Cultural Heritage Grant Program materials. Hi, Caitlin.
Hi, thank you for having me, Commissioners. I'm Caitlin Amerlin. I'm the Heritage Conservation Coordinator for Douglas County, and I'm here tonight to share some of the revisions that we made to the Natural and Cultural Heritage Grant Program and answer any questions you might have, and move to approve those materials for next year, which is right around the corner, believe it or not. And so for a little bit of context, I'm sure you all are familiar, but the Natural and Cultural Heritage Grant Program is a function of the Heritage Conservation Council. They recommend grant awards to you all for a whole range of diverse projects that touch natural and cultural heritage. It's a really unique program and offers a lot of organizations great opportunity for funding for projects that really impact these specific communities across Douglas County. And so there's a little bit of context of why revisions were needed, why they were made. I jumped into this role in March of this year and immediately launched into the grant program. And through that process of being new in the position and also learning from Heritage Conservation Council members and feedback from current and past grantees and applicants, we realized that there is some points of unclarity in the previous application and the guidelines, and so there was need to kind of look over all the materials with a fresh look and sort of kind of reset the program in a way, refresh everything over time. This grant program has been going on for about 10 years and it's been added to piece by piece over time. And so through that, there was a lot of mismatching information, a lot of confusion between grant reviewers and applicants. And so this whole process was just to increase that clarity, specifically with a lens of equity as well. One of the main things we did this fall was we worked with a DEI consultant, Alex Kimball Williams, who is wonderful to work with, to conduct an equity assessment on our grant program. So really highlighting what the current strengths of the program are and what some of the opportunities for continuing to make the program more equitable. And so we've used her assessment into some of the revisions that we've made and also identified some future steps that we might be able to take with the grant program to, again, make the grant program more equitable and accessible to both diverse applicants and projects. I think this program can really benefit from any sort of steps we can take in that direction. It's also been informed by a couple of other projects that we've worked on this year, such as the Rural Historic Resources Guide that we presented a few months ago. This past summer, I did a dive into what has been funded by the grant program. There wasn't super great record keeping, so we have a bit more information about what was funded. And so that just helps inform how we can continue to grow the diversity of projects represented by the grant program. And then also the strategic planning that HCC did. There was a few adjustments made last year to reflect the strategic planning, but not a comprehensive look. And so really, I laid out in the memo some of the major revisions that we made, but really all those revisions were intended to do was to make the grant guidelines, application, and review criteria all sort of match each other. So that's really the approach we took, and some of the more significant revisions were to the grant review side of it, and those review criteria. There was previously a long list, about a dozen of review criteria that were sort of overlapping and unclear, and so we took a long a look at that list and refined it down to 8 criteria that we feel are fairly distinct enough to warrant themselves on their own. And also there was a point there that really helped with the equity assessment, adding in a specific consideration of equity that the grant reviewers will review on. And that helps balance some less equitable criteria like matching resources. So for smaller organizations that might not have access to those, while they may score lower in that category, they can kind of be matched with that equity consideration. And so I'm really proud of that direction. And then also in terms of the grant guidelines, we really just added a lot more clarity to the guidelines, really listed out things a lot simpler, added more clarity to the matching resources requirements, indirect cost requirements, and also added some priority considerations that were practiced by the Heritage Conservation Council, but were not written on paper previously. And so things like geographic diversity, prioritizing lived experience, and marginalized projects led by folks with lived experience and from marginalized communities. And also clarifying the historic preservation projects and prioritizing as defined by the Rural Historic Resources Guides, prioritizing projects that prioritize the historic listing of the property. So that really rises to the list, but still leaves in flexibility for projects that might fall outside of those categories that might still be of interest. And so HCC did a lot of work on really reflecting on that. And so with all these things, and that included we're gonna review how that works this year and see if we need to add more or see if that works for our needs. And then in the application itself, we mostly reviewed and reworded the application questions to make them more clear, more simple, and kind of act as a way for applicants to develop their project a bit further. That was another note from Alex as well that I'm going to carry with me into the meetings I have with applicants before, is kind of looking at this grant program in terms of professional development as well. So in access and equity in that sense of this is a really great opportunity for us to support some of these organizations in a way, especially with me in my role, and I can really take that time to help applicants understand the process a bit better and help them build projects, and that they could use this knowledge gained from this process and potentially use that for larger grants and above and beyond. So I'm really looking forward to that and that lens. So we applied that to the application. So hopefully it should be a bit simpler in those veins. We also created a couple of templates to help applicants along in the process, like budget templates, things like that. So again, providing more resources, more materials for applicants to understand the process a bit better. And finally, we wrote down our grant review procedure. Essentially, nothing changed, but really spelled out what the role of each person is in that process. And that will be available on our website so members of the public and applicants can understand that process a bit better. It also defines the Heritage Coordinator role in those the award recommendation meetings and defines the role of the council members in those meetings, which will be helpful. We have 2 new council members this year, and if, for instance, there was a new Heritage Coordinator who found themselves in that role, they have the sort of expectations of what those meetings should look like, and I think that will just help with the greater transparency of the program. And I think that's just about it. Specifically to this year, we have some additional funding. We have a one-time increase to the general HCC grant pool, thanks to generous donations from members of the community in memory of Kurt Von Auken, who was a very dedicated public servant here and was a past HCC member. So we matched those donations with HCC funds to round that up. So I think that will be a great use of those funds. Yeah, and we also have an additional $200,000 this year for open space projects. So this was a part of the open space allotment of ARPA awards, and so we've determined that this is a good use. We did this last year. We only had 2 applicants to that pool last year, but there was a lot less clarity of what open space meant and what the process of distributing those federal funds looked like. So I think that we're in a much better space to recruit more projects this year, and I'm really excited to see what sort of projects we get. We also added some specific categories to those open space grants, so I think that'll help applicants understand what that money is to be used for a bit better. But yeah, those are the primary changes, and I just wanted to share those with you in the direction we're headed. There's a couple more things we might look at in the future to add to the program, like for instance, maybe having a shorter application for seed grants and the smaller grants, or potentially adding external grant reviewers to help with the scoring pool, since there can be sometimes a few recusals on certain grants, so we can add in at least additional scoring numbers to the pool to help HCC make decisions a bit better. But yeah, that's all in the future, and we're excited to see how these changes work this year, and yeah, how we continue to grow and expand this program. And happy to answer any questions or anything along the lines.
Commissioners, any questions for Caitlin?
My question is not really specific to any of the changes, but just curious what sort of outreach efforts look like and, for lack of a better phrase, solicitation of those grant applications. You know, there's the people who are in the know that have applied for various projects year after year. What kind of efforts are you all working on to spread the word further?
Yeah, so we have a list that HCC has compiled over time of organizations and individuals that might be interested in this work or who have touched HCC in the past. So we will send an email to that list, but I know something HCC is interested in working on, and I know they've done it in the past too. So I think we can revisit some of those lists of compiling organizations in Douglas County that might be interested in this grant funding and sending email notices specifically to them, perhaps some personalized messages to certain groups that might particularly be interested in these funds. I know in meetings I've attended, you know, the last few weeks and going into the next bit of just sharing this information, you know, in community spaces. And I think putting in those emails specifically about, you know, sharing it with others who might be interested. And I think there's a fair bit of word of mouth knowledge of this grant, but there can always be more, you know, you can always reach folks who don't know what this grant can be used for too. So being clear that there's a wide variety of projects that can fall into this grant program.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And I think, you know, that notion of thinking about even sort of personalized emails to some organizations that maybe don't seem to quite fit on the surface, especially with the changes that you've made and the sort of intentional work to really clarify things and also be expansive and intentional about the definition of what types of things might be eligible to help, you know, sort of prompt folks to think outside the box and beyond the more what it sounds like to somebody, or projects that maybe organizations have been familiar with before and thought is not really in their lane. So I appreciate that you're thinking about that, and it's a good opportunity to spread the word about a process that is cleaned up and makes more sense, and I think has also a lot more opportunity for transparency and creativity.
I'd also like to add, we'd like to share, we will share it on our social media, and hopefully
Oh,
our
yes.
friends in the media will help us out by making some announcements that the grant cycle's open. Hint, hint.
Well, I'm really excited about the streamlining work and just capturing some of the structure that did exist and then adding to that structure so that this is something that, onboarding new board members or new directors becomes more automatic because the structure is there and stable. So I think those efforts take time and attention and focus from the council, but they're very well worth it. And any kind of clarity you can offer in a grant process is so helpful for applicants. Did I hear that you meet with applicants? So if someone approaches us and they're interested in pursuing a grant, should they just access the online materials or should they reach out to you?
Yes, so we'll be launching the online materials January 9th. That's the kind of start of the program. So they'll be available then. But yes, all applicants are required to meet with me, the Heritage Conservation Coordinator, prior to submitting an application. That just helps to make sure that their project is eligible and they're on the right track as far as the application and what the council might be interested in or what those review criteria are. But yes, so they'll have to meet with me prior to, I believe it's February 23rd. So it's a couple months or a month and a half after the launch of the program.
I also really appreciate the efforts that went to being able to open up that fund for the Kurt Van Auken's memorial. That meant a lot to his widow, and I know that had to happen in a short period of time and took some hoops to jump through. It is what he wanted and what his family wanted for him and his memory, and I'm just pleased to see that translated through to there'll be some projects that come through that wouldn't happen without his gift.
Caitlin, I think this is really great work. I'm interested if it was shared with any past applicant, the new version was shared with any past applicants or future applicants for feedback.
It has not been shared with them directly, but that is a part that we would like to improve in the future is sending out a survey or evaluation post-application or post-award to continue to get feedback. I know I met with several applicants throughout after the grant cycle and got some knowledge there from them in those conversations. So that also influenced these, but this has not been reviewed directly by them yet. But I'm hopeful that we'll continue to get feedback directly from grantees in the process moving forward.
It's also a question you can ask in the application, just like this doesn't affect your score. What parts of this seemed confusing or needed additional attention? And I've seen other organizations do that. It's rare, but it's a great way to get feedback in the moment so that you don't have to wait for like the reporting period or kind of a random follow-up.
That's a great point. I know we've discussed that a bit as HCC of what's the right time to ask for that. So I think we'll get something established for this year and maybe firm it up for next grant cycle.
I want to commend the group for the equity assessment. I think that's something that this commission, as we visited with the HCC recently, said we'd like to see a little bit more of. You shared a little bit of the recommendations that came from that, but I want to give you an opportunity to share any other recommendations that you think really show up in here, or you said are in the future might be things that take place because of that equity assessment.
Yeah, I think one of the main things was just a place of learning for myself in HCC and learning about how grant programs can be inequitable and sort of highlighting the features of grant programs that might be barriers. So things like detailed budgets and understanding what can be matching funds, what can't be. So that was really important in just that learning of what can be improved, but I think really the main things we focused on were those criteria, so continuing to look into those, and then Alex made some great recommendations about the application itself, so potentially shortening that application in the future. I think that's something HCC is definitely interested in. That'll take more discussion. We're going to have a retreat after the grant season is complete in about May, and I think that's going to be one of our main topics of discussion is sort of where do we go from here, and especially considering how we can shorten the application for those who might not need all this information, and also considering how we, just increase that accessibility to those funds for projects that might be just kind of sort of a no-brainer. How can we make that easier?
Was there any talk of translating the grant application into Spanish, for example?
That is not something that we discussed, but that could be a wonderful sort of next step. And just, again, accessibility. I know another part of accessibility is just making the application itself more user-friendly. We kind of made some improvements this year to our online application, but I think there's always more room for improvement in just making it easier to access. Currently, applicants have to fill out a form and then be emailed a link. So it's a little bit complicated for folks who might not be super tech savvy, but we will, in terms of if folks, like, for instance, don't have access or regular access to internet, they can work with me directly to find a solution there. But I think there's a lot of improvement that can be made on just the accessibility of the application itself.
I think, yeah, this body is very interested in just kind of expanding the stories, the scope of stories that we hear or have heard, or that we, kind of pushing the envelope for what Lawrence and Douglas County kind of understands as their cultural heritage, and really bringing in more voices there. And so I'm glad to see that the equity consideration is one of the part of the scoring rubric specifically. And I think that that'll help kind of keep that lens foremost.
Yeah, and the changes this year are really just kind of a start on that process. We can only do so much this year, but I think we've got, good goals that we've set. And with this conversation, and we'll continue it into the spring, of how can we continue to build on this and take those bigger steps.
I certainly appreciate how intentional and focused equity is in these materials, and also just really appreciate seeing that thoughtful and much more clear scoring rubric. And, that's something that we discussed this year and that I've thought in previous years, not really understanding how those decisions came to be or what the process was. And so that being much more clear and understanding what people are working off of and how that will guide the discussions is really helpful for me to have, frankly, just a little bit more confidence in both the process and the outcome of that process, rather than sort of questioning it and trying to retroactively suss out some of those things. So I really appreciate that part of the work, and know that that can be hard to create sort of tangible explanations for that really translate to lots of people and perspectives when they're reviewing these. But I think it looks really great. And oh gosh, I had a thought before and it left me, so we'll see if it comes.
Any other comments or questions? Go ahead.
I would make a suggestion for the group to consider within that equity consideration of adding women also as a category that is kind of underrepresented in terms of voices. Just when I look back through my family history, like the voices of women, which were exactly 50% of the stories there, are just harder to capture. So I'd be interested in that too, but just for consideration by the board.
Thank you.
Okay, I remembered my thought before it escapes me again. Caitlin, you mentioned earlier sort of not the greatest record keeping over times, and so trying to look back at project applications that did not translate into awards was difficult. I appreciate you making that point, because I think moving forward that is an important piece of data to really be tracking, and especially for, I would venture to guess that there are many people who made multiple attempts over time, and for one reason or 5 reasons each of those years were denied, and we don't have a good sense of why, other than whoever might remember what that application review was, right? And so part of it is the seeking feedback from applicants about the process, and being able to capture the information about who is it that didn't get awarded, did they come back and apply again, did they articulate what they thought might have been a barrier for them, how are we assessing that? Because I think that it can tell us some important things about accessibility, and awareness of a process that some people take for granted and make a lot of assumptions about, and other people's might need a lot of support through it. So I appreciate knowing, and I think this has been implemented in this process for a long time, but now it's really clear in writing that that they are able to, that initial meeting with you and ability to sort of screen and help direct or guide what that application process looks like just increases the potential for success. And so I appreciate that, instead of it being a very, I don't know what the word is, but a less involved process. So I appreciate that part of it too.
Yeah, I really feel empowered through the work we did to really be supportive in those meetings. I'm not going to write, the answers to the application questions, but I can really help build that project if they need it. So I feel real empowered in that role to, help people access these funds in a way that's beneficial to the community. Yeah.
Any other questions for Caitlin? Okay. Is there any public comment on this item? Anyone online, Sarah? Okay. We'll close public comment. Any final comments for Caitlin or motions?
Happy to make a motion to approve the 2024 Natural and Cultural Heritage Grant Program guidelines and application.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes 3-0. Thank you, Caitlin.
Thank you.
All right, commissioners, we're on to appointments. And I think we do have an appointment this evening. Commissioner Reed?
Yes, I am very excited to share that I have had a conversation with Mariel Ferrero about being appointed to the Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority. I also had an opportunity to talk with Shannon Oury, the executive director there. And as fellow commissioners know, Mariel is very deeply steeped in the work of housing and homelessness in our community and has been for several years, was a long-term staff member at the Housing Authority, and maybe serendipitously moved on earlier this year to a job on a national level, doing a lot of the same work, but with a larger impact. And that has sort of freed her up and made her eligible to serve on the board. And luckily, she is excited for that. And I think that she will bring a lot of experience and knowledge and enthusiasm to that board. I guess I should make a formal motion. So I move to appoint Mariel Ferrero to the Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority for a term that is for a 4-year term to begin January 2024.
I would gladly second that. I agree. She's an excellent candidate for that. And just the learning curve with working with a new organization and with HUD, like she has much of that already. And that'll make her onboarding just, fast and efficient. And I think she's going to be a fabulous voice there.
Yeah, I'm also very supportive. I think her experience at Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority is really good because of her connection with those who have lived experience trying to find housing. And yet I'm also pleased, and I hope people don't take this the wrong way, but I can't control that she doesn't work directly for one of the agencies that may receive that funding. I think that's sometimes a tension on the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, is that we have so many people who are on that board who are also applicants to that fund, and it creates some conflicts. Mariel doesn't work for that anymore. I want to confirm that.
We're talking about the Housing Authority, not AHAB.
Thank you. Yes.
But still a valid point.
But still, yes.
In a
Okay.
different context, but valid
Got
point.
confused there. Yes, thank you. She'd still be great.
She also has had, conversations with landlords about barriers there also, so that, lived experience on both sides. I mean, that's a lot of the challenge, especially in using vouchers, is communicating between tenants and landlords and the needs of landlords. So I think she'll bring a great lens, multiple great lenses to that role.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, passes 3-0. Any other appointments, commissioners? Don't think we have any, Sarah, just checking, yeah. Okay, we'll move on to miscellaneous items, and we typically start with Sarah's memo.
Commissioners, just several updates from various boards and committees that work with the county. This is our last meeting of 2023. We'll be taking the next 2 weeks off and then coming back in 2024 on the 10th. And commissioners, that's all I've got, and stand for any questions.
Did we notice the Chamber of Commerce gathering to talk about legislative agendas?
The legislative breakfast.
Yep, I'll make sure we get that added.
Okay.
Anything else, commissioners?
I wanted to just give a shout out to Lawrence Douglas County Public Health for the grant that they received through the Kansas Leadership Center for 70 positions to go through that training. It's a fabulous asset to our community and that's a lot of work to go through that grant process. So I just wanted to give that shout out, that I appreciate their work and also the leadership that will come out of it.
Yeah, I just have one final thing. I think I speak for all commissioners sharing gratitude for our staff. This is usually a time of year when we're wrapping up, and we just want to thank Sarah and the entire Douglas County staff for all the work that they do on behalf of our community every day. I hope they get some time off here. Sarah, if you give them a little time off, that'd be helpful to rest up and enjoy time with loved ones and family. Just thank you for all the work that you do as our Douglas County staff. If there's nothing else, we are adjourned.